Hi, you are watching Now TV or Good Morning World. Actually, afternoon, late afternoon. So I'm back to keep going with the stories, the poems. This will be the last one from the second book, and it's pretty significant. This is a different project that I'm working on. Been working on forever. Just no time. I've just not had. My life's been difficult. No, I wanted to do this with Quentin Tarantino. There was this book written in the 70s about the sex trade, from generic places like hotel called American Hotel. So you can go in time, the past and current, and see what's the same from then to now at the place that are named the same. And in this particular case, my idea was to cross both countries. Because yes, Canada has hotels called things the same as America. I worked and lived out of uh, the American Hotel in Vancouver, and it went with that 100 years. That building has since been sold and renewed. I don't like it. It was much better as it was in its original form. So I go with that 100 years, which goes with that book. Now, what I learned from that book about women in university in the States at that time in the 70s, women have improved. They've come a long way. It took about 50 women collecting information, stories from girls, and that life and that volume of time. It took about 50 people to write that one book. So what I did was I filtered out the best. And it was about characters that I'm going to have just named letters. So, well, they had them like that. So I remember the letters exactly, JKLM or something. So we're going to use those letters to go back and forth between the two places in the two different years in the two countries. I don't know. I say we, but there's no surety that Quentin is going to have time, or that I'll have time, or that we'll have time. But I did manage to get this time, and I did start handwriting out the sections from that book deliberately. So this is an excerpt from from that project that I'm working on, and it's called The Quartet. And then it just says, woman. Here then the double sexual image of woman. Circe on the one hand, Aurora on the other. All that is evil, all that is ideal. Like a compress for drawing fever, woman is endowed with the sexual unreality the race longs for, burdened with a life-destroying innocence. For make no mistake, her evil is certainly as innocent a genuine knowledge as is her goldenness, that makes of her at one and the same time obsessively sexual and extraordinarily asexual. And of course, in the end, that's it. The final mythic outsidedness of woman is that ultimately she is beyond sex. Steeped in sex, drugged on sex, defined by sex, but never actually realized through sex. She has gone beyond it. She has gone through it. She is on the other side. Woman has been defined primarily in her society as a sexual object, either one of lust or one of chastity. She has been allowed to be nothing else, essentially. She continues to lie back in bed, never taking, always being taken, never absorbed by her own desire, preoccupied only with whether or not she is desired. Amen. That is very relevant. Uh, in my case, it's what I'm sick of. The fact that I've been abused from the beginning, my entire life growing up, learning about love was all steeped in violence and abuse. It's all based on some form of human trafficking. But they're trying to do this free. So they get out of or get around calling it that. But free just makes it worse, makes you more insane and criminal, and makes God more blood guilty and committing the same degree of crime that people go to jail for. Only he can't go to jail because he's God to time indefinite. Um, the devil, however, is much meaner and more evil, right? So it's not as equal to the hope that God tries to make it possible that she will feel love at some point, even if it's not at the beginning. So I just said, to hell with this. I don't want to be a victim or victimized anymore. So I started changing my life, started taking, what do you call it? Self-defense, security training. I've through the roof stuff, emotional intelligence, drugs in you, anger in you, respite training, peer support training. Like, it's just a lifetime of training to become a leader, to get a job set of skills that moves you up in the world, moves you away from ever being at risk to be in a situation like this describes again. Asexuality. Only half the women in the world ever experience orgasms today. And for centuries, they never had any at all. So asexuality is a woman that lays on her back and allows a man to take her, to be taken, and worried about whether or not she is desired by that man so that she will have a purpose, a function, which is what the devil is more like than God is. But it's still bad in both cases. You can't justify either, where she is to feel like she has no purpose or function unless she is desired by the opposite. But it's never about whether she is loving herself. And it's dreadfully wrong to be preoccupied about what he's thinking, what he wants, what he needs. Will you be good enough? So in Freud's book, there was a woman in it, the subject, who experienced one single orgasm and died from the experience of experiencing it because of the way she was raised and how she was treated as a woman. It's either you are one of lust or one of chastity. And I guess she had been abused. She had been used so bad in that way, where it was always about that man's desire, that she was always absorbed by that, to the point where experiencing the pleasure was so painful, she died from it. She couldn't bear living any longer for what she had been put through. Pretty scary stuff. Dying from something that's a natural part of our body, our natural right to have and enjoy, our natural abilities to do this for ourselves. So the other thing that is sinful about church and God and Bible in all levels is the idea that it's telling you never to touch yourself, never to touch your body, never know your body, never do anything with it. It's saying that you're supposed to wait and just leave it for the man and hope that the man is good enough to give you pleasure. But if he doesn't, oh well, you still lie there on your back and let him get his pleasure. So what happens in asexuality is 9 times out of 10, a woman is raising children which was spawned from a man's orgasms. So she's raising his orgasms because he's come and she's never had those orgasms. So she has no benefit of enjoying having any sexual gratification or pleasure, and is raising these children. And that's where the asexuality comes from. That's what that means, right? Just procreating and raising those without actually having a sexuality, because without having orgasm, then there's a form of chastity and virginity that's still in place, isn't there? And it's wrong to think that that's okay. You can't tell somebody who has no orgasm, who's in that state of chastity, who's been slept with by 7 brothers because each one dies, that that's virginity. That is just cryptic, sick. Shouldn't be allowed, but it has been. And so it's been a long time for her to fight for her right to realize who she is. So part of the comment here about having lived through sex and being beyond sex, steeped in sex, drugged on sex, defined by sex, but never actually realized through sex because she's never been given pleasure. The point of beyond it is Jesus died. He was impaled for salvation to save us. And you have to think about the story from before, on, and after. And what's one thing that's the same before the death, before the impalement, during the impalement, and after the impalement? What has remained? Woman. Woman is the best creation God ever made. The most beautiful thing in form outside of the actual lower animals and the earth. But they're also the least cursed. I mean, they're also the most cursed, and they're the worst treated. The animals get treated better. They have more freedom and rights. And of all the cultures I've done research on and been living around, the First Nations, the Aborigines, were the ones to love and treat their women and children the best. All through history, during the 5 centuries that Aboriginally lived freely in the world, from the North Pole all the way down to Australia, they treated their women as equals. They gave their women the right to either sew, stay home, knit, menstruate, have children, or hunt, or lay traps, and go out and work with the men and do stuff. They didn't stop them from learning and wanting to be productive and fit in more ways other than just child rearing. And the way they loved and treated their women gave the women the freedom to work together to find good men that they loved and could respect and raise children for him in an amount they're each pleased to do so, to give him a larger tribe because he was such a good man. All these experiences we see in the world today with people committing adultery, affairs, coming up with rules for relationships, all these men that try to do this polygamy stuff, and they're making the decisions and choices, they're doing it all wrong. So it never works out. There's always problems. Left to a man's own desire, he's going to go after lust and vanity. He's going to go after youth and looks. He's not going to go after brains or education, good parenting qualities. But the Aboriginal men, because the good ones were so good, they let women choose each other. I love you, or I could love you. You could be my sister. You be my sister. You be my sister. And we all see he's a good man. And one would say, well, I only want 4. Another one would say, well, I want 6. And the other one would say, well, I want 8. Right? And then it'd be one that's, oh, I just want 1 or 2. And so that's how it worked. And they did. They raised those children as their own. Each one had their own, but they worked together as a community, as a tribe, and it was a wonderful way of life. There was peace and happiness and joy, and it wasn't steeped in asexuality. They knew what pleasure was. They knew what love was. And by that standard of way of life in that culture, there was no issues with being gay. This whole lesbian stuff, this whole spectrum deal, it's way too complicated. Sex is not that complicated. It isn't that difficult. It isn't that hard. And we should never have made it that. But it's not okay to rape somebody 1,000 times and try to say that person's still a virgin. You cannot make money from sex. You can't do human trafficking with a person, even for free, 1,000 times, and call that virginity anymore. So we've come a long way, and it's good that this has started, but it's not enough. We need more. So I'm hoping that I may still be able to separate the stories from the book to still finish the project in my head, where you're going to use some major characters like Bruce Willis and Samuel L. Jackson, who play significant people in the stories. Like, for instance, Bruce would be a father of a daughter that's one of the girls. Samuel L. Jackson could be the pimp from the past in the American Hotel out of New York in the 70s. Bruce Willis could be the father of some girl from current times of the American Hotel in Vancouver. So you got the attention brought into the significance and seriousness of the father trying to get his daughter to get out of his life. Get out, way out, quit. Trying to understand what happened. Why did you end up out here? What went wrong? What am I not knowing? What are you not telling me? What did I do wrong? And maybe he was a good father and it wasn't him. Maybe the secret was being raped or abused, and it was through family, and she never told anybody. And so maybe through that story, he finds out who, and then he loses his mind, but it doesn't change anything. So you can take the girl out of the streets, but you can't take the streets out of the girl. You can take the girl out of the punk clothes, but you can't take the punk out of the girl. You can take her out of the blue hair and the piercings and out of the boots, but that's still who's there. And so that's where I'm telling my story now, when it's all been taken off after my first divorce, because art, my acting career, certain things require me to look certain ways for certain parts. And if I had kept all of that together and on, it would have limited my ability to work. I would have been stigmatized. So that at that time, the 50 women to write one book thing, today, one woman could write that same book to show the evolution of a woman's mind and how hard it's been for us to become people, recognized as humans, as persons under the law, and then to be recognized as women with intelligence and capability and educational rights to go further and higher than men, and then fight for our wages. Now, we're still fighting, but we've come a long way. Today, it doesn't take 50 women to have a conversation about sex trade work between the 70s and now, and get a degree in social work and write about that. So now I'm going to use my 50 women in here, and I'm going to talk about my first 50 from the ages of 12 to 18, what it means to be naturalized, and show how today that 50 books I've read and 50 experiences I've had have warranted me today to be one woman with the intelligence of 50 from a previous time, and a book that relates to that time to now. It's an awesome connection. I think it's fantastic. So this is the last one from this story, and I'll be back with more from the third book. I'm going to finish getting this all up. There are other pieces beyond what I had picked for the Burden of Truth TV show. I may choose to share that stuff as well. But so that's 10. 9 did come. I did get an appointment to come through last night. These are new numbers from the time I broke. It hasn't been a lot or often. I'm very fussy. I take my time. But when it's an urgency, that's what it's there for, to back up to the backup to the backup. Because I got hurt so badly. I barely survived. I was having my heart broken twice by two different guys, two different sides of the country. And I thought, no more. I'm not going to fall to my knees and break this time. I will not be the one who's going to hurt. This time it's him. This time he's got to deal with his fall from grace. It's going to be him that has to come around and fix it. So that goes with telling my story here and now. And I hope that burden of proof in human trafficking Canada stuff will start this week. Fingers crossed. Till then, I'll keep doing this. So I'll be back. Thank you for listening. Keep coming back. There's lots more to tell. Amen and God bless, and have happy Sunday. Mine was good. I got to go to church. I like going to fast Sundays. I get to give talks and listen to other talks, and it's really important that we do that. We still have our Christ with us in spite of how difficult our life may be, because it does help make it easier knowing we're not alone. We have Jesus and we have each other. Amen.